magnificent city. And we've been meeting for the first time for a couple of us, and I think others have been, around the venue today. You know why we're here? We want to make the world a better place, and more specifically, we want to have a much more comprehensive and humanistic agenda for development. And we've been working with our friends from Africa, our friends from the United States, our friends from Europe, and I think we're at a point of people from the United States, a point of inflection. And we just came from a meeting of finance ministers who were talking about an inflection point. And they were saying that we need to recognize that the multilateral system over the last 80 years really hasn't worked. And the relationship between Europe and Africa over the last 40 years hasn't delivered, hasn't worked. So they're talking about change, change, change. And we know all about change from the Science Summit, where we have our annual change-making day. And those of you who know me know I'm a bit of a policy walk. And those who don't know me, I'm telling you I'm a policy walk. And the reason I'm a policy walk is, if we don't engage with policy making, which is a highly complex and sophisticated and cumbersome and obscure process, then we're not going to be able to create change. And I think this is where we, are galvanizing, and partly why we're absolutely delighted that Eli is hosting us tonight, because his thing is going to tell you in a second. I call him Mr. Resilience. So how do you create this? How do you respond to this multifaceted array of challenges that we're facing? Yeah? What's up, what's down, what's around, where do you start? And how's another cliche? Everything is connected. I think we've seen that. So I think resilience is our gateway, and part of what we're going to be doing these 2 days, and of course not just these 2 days, but we'll be working with Eli since the Science Summit last year, and we'll also be driving a resilience agenda towards the Science Summit this year, and then future policy making. So what Eli has taught me is that this approach is hugely necessary. It applies right across the board, whether we're talking about science policy or agricultural policy or common policy. Resilience can be, it isn't yet, can be a foundational approach. And certainly when we're talking about food security, we're talking about hunger, and we're talking about that from a global perspective, we need to have a common narrative, I would call a common narrative, and I think resilience is just that. And of course, in this life, you need to be able to tell stories, right? You need to be able to communicate, you need to be able to get people on board with your narrative. And the science agenda that we've been driving during the FFD4, the Financing for Development Conference, here in Seville, is quite innovative. There's some science there, yes, absolutely, not nearly enough. But it's okay, we've got 10 years, we've got 10 years to do this. But of course we have to look at this in immediate terms, in medium-term terms, and in terms of final outcomes. But those outcomes have to start from the point of view now. There's a certain urgency, whether you look at food security, whether you look at the climate, whether you look at the environment, whether you look at radio astronomy. There are huge, enormous challenges, but they are immediate. But of course, stuff doesn't happen overnight. And again, those of you who know our association with the SKA, the idea for Africa's leadership on the Square Kilometre Array Telescope, you can read all about it online, started in 1992, if not 1993. And it's under construction, but it's still very much in progress. And that's just how you got to view things. Stuff takes time, but it requires dedication, it requires commitment, it requires foresight. And of course, you have to look for beneficial outcomes as you go along. But there has to be this big picture. And we do that, in my view, in future by having a resilience approach. The Danish presidency of the European Union is upon us. And the reason I point to that is because the Danish presidency has recently announced, guess what, a minister for resilience. So I'm following that very, very closely to see how can we learn from that. But I think it's a very, very significant milestone that you would have a member of the Council of Europe responsible for resilience. And I think it's going to really, well, already is catching on. So what we're concerned here, and with the discussions we have in the next 2 days, is what is it? How do you do it? Where do you do it? how do you implement? And of course, the conversations, this is Mr. Resilience, but it's also Mr. Implementation, I'm Mr. Policy. So I'm thinking, okay, what is the policy framework? And then how can that deliver? Implementation, I think, is the key word I've been hearing from the finance ministers a couple of hours ago, but of course, not just. We've heard a lot about implementation. So how do you do this policy making stuff and also immediately and very, very fast translate that into implementable measures that policymakers can see the benefit of, but of course, why do it? Improve people's lives. Eli?
Thank you, definitely. Anybody want to follow an Irishman? It's not easy. But it saves me work. So, my name is Eli. I guess I'm Mr. Resilient now. I will. Thank you for coming here. And how many people here are a little proud they survived a 108-degree day? Well dressed. So, congratulations. I don't want to point out to you that this is going to become normal.
But it will.
It is. So we're all in the same boat. Every one of us, most of us, we understand in our own ways the world is changing. We did this, and we don't have a lot of time. As Declan mentioned, I'm part of a commission that was supposed to look at U.S. societal resilience. So the first thing we did was we looked for instructions on how to be resilient. And I'll be honest, I was disappointed. I love the SDGs, we all do. Shall I go in the middle? Because I don't have Declan's beautiful. So, our origin story is probably the same origin story everybody's going. At some point in the last few years, many of us started to think the things we are doing need to be helping. We are in this together. And if we ignore this, we will not be in the problem.
Louder!
Not what?
Louder!
Louder! I'm out of practice, a little sick, not drunk. So I apologize. So we looked for instructions on how to make communities resilient, and we could not find them. And where's Ramesh? Ramesh, a number of others that we called ourselves the Resilient Club. And there's no rules, and so you're all part of it now. But what we've been looking for is an actual definition of resilience and an actual roadmap for how a community can be resilient. How, whether we're talking about small communities in South Africa with water and health, large communities like Cape Town that runs out of water, Boston that's boiling right now, hotter than here. And we've looked at the past and haven't found any answers from the past of how to build these kinds of things. So the first thing our group did was look around at what the definitions of resilience are. It turns out that everybody cares about this. So if you're a psychologist, you talk about resilience. Essentially that when people attack you, you come back stronger. And if you're an ecologist, resilience is one of the first things you learn about. Civil engineers talk about resilience. The problem historically has been we do all these things separate. And so Clark pointed out that resilience is something that each one of our professionals understands. And I think we now all understand we need to do it together instead of separate. So engineering resilience in this next period of our lives we find to be critical. I don't want to start a sales pitch, but some of the work we've been doing is to really get at how do we define resilience. And when we actually threw a lot of the wisdom of our world into a blender, we took the EU, we took the SDGs, we took the planetary boundaries, Sundai. 7 principles come out that I'm not going to do. And I invite you to look at our website, resilienceagenda.org. What you'll see is there are common principles, and we need to invite each other to start to work through more details. we can come to a common definition. And I think once we're aligned that we need to be resilient, that we need to work through ways that affect all of us, I think we can make progress. I also want to say I think we have less time than people say. So the SDG sunset is 5 years. Every bit of science tells me that's our tipping point time. So the kickoff needs to be now, sir.
What is your definition of resilience for yourself?
Standing right now in 110-degree weather with no sleep, per white wine. Resilience is bouncing back better. There is no part of your life or your world where you're not being punched all the time. It's life. Not falling down is important, but I think it's more than that. We learn from each of these battles and we become stronger. So resilience is bouncing back stronger, but I think ecologically it's much more about survival. I mean, all these words we make up, sustainability, we mean surviving well. And to do that now, we need instructions, and I think we might realize we don't really have a good set of instructions right now. And so this dinner is actually a kickoff, not to tell you what resilience is, but to put it on your map. And let's decide together what it is. As Declan said, we're calling it the Resilient Agenda because it's a 5-year agenda to develop this together. And this policy wonk over here, we say wonk in America. Walk, where I am, is what we make food in, but he's a policy walk. And we need to make policies fast. And policy people need to know what the science is and what the words are that everybody can understand. And so these are the things we are working on, making words we can understand that are scientifically valid for how a community can become resilient. I'm not here to solve climate change immediately. So we together can be thinking about these at the highest level, but really we need to do it at the lowest level. We are a community here. So the things I want to think about are, one, the obvious. We're in this together. Silos need to go away. 2, you cannot think about the world. It's too big. We need to think about actual, real communities. A place in South Africa, a place in New York, a place in Barcelona. Maybe not all of Barcelona, like a neighborhood. And you need to look at what it takes to make that area. And again, I don't have the answer, but we're starting with the question and maybe a different approach. And I can't believe I'm doing this, invite you to go to resilientagenda.org because we've put all of our details there. Everything we can think of. This is open source. You read it, you want to talk about it, give your talk on it the next day without attribution, give it. It's there to understand what we know about climate resilience, health resilience, and it's meant to start to collect stories and case studies that can teach us it. So I think we should eat, and we have all your emails, and this is a free dinner, and the only thing I do is invite you to follow on the agenda with us. And the next step is UNGA in 3 months.
Let's say, even New York, even
Resilient, together.
anything,
All of us. I won't forget your name, but hopefully we'll learn to become
let's
friends.
shift the cities.
Thank you.